Three things to like with the RAD R-1 runner. Number one, I think if you're looking for a non-specific running shoe and you're a lot more generalist with your running needs, that's where the R1 runner is going to excel the most. This is not necessarily a shoe that I would reach for dedicated sprint work or even marathon work. Granted, you can use them for both categories, but I'll talk about why I wouldn't in my cons. This is a really good shoe, I think, for your more generalist stuff. So if you're running 1 to 3 to 5-ish miles, even 7 miles, this model is going to excel really well. I'm more of your hybrid bro, so I like to lift, do CrossFit, and then also run on a weekly basis, accruing anywhere from like 12 to 15 to 18 miles depending on my training load, and the shoe has done an exceptional job for all of my demands. I generally run between anywhere from like 7.5 to 9.5 minute miles depending on my plan for the day, and this model has felt pretty good with its swell foam into midsole here. It's a little bit more on the middle density side. It's not overly responsive, but it's not super plush, so it's kind of like that middle of the road midsole, which is also why I think this shoe really works well as a more generalist running shoe. The second thing to like with this shoe is if you are somebody like myself who likes to wear running shoes here and there for day-to-day wear, and you want a shoe that looks pretty good and more casual, that's where I think this shoe can excel. This upper does look pretty good. Now the stack height obviously is pretty high and it still shouts running shoe. However, there are a lot of colorways that have more of a toned down or more aesthetic appearance. So if you're like me and you like to go to the airport, for example, and wear running shoes because they're more comfortable, they keep your feet a little bit more cushioned throughout the day while you're standing, walking, etc., that's where the shoe can excel. And the shoe also works for things like running errands and walking the pup. I have walked Maui countless miles in this shoe, and it's remained relatively comfortable, and overall it's been pretty dang durable regarding its outsole and midsole. My third pro with this shoe is if you want a neutral running shoe that has a bit of arch support, this model can be a really good option to look into. This model has a heel to toe drop that sits at 8 millimeters. The stack height in the forefoot is 24 millimeters, and then back here in the heel it's 32 millimeters, and there is a bit of arch. And so once again, if you want more of a neutral shoe with a bit of arch support, that's where the RAD R1 runner can also excel. But now let's talk about a couple of cons that I have with the R1 runner. So two potential cons that I could see folks having with the RAD R1 runner is number one, long-term durability up here on the extended outsole on the toe box. Mine is already starting to kind of lip here on the right side. It's not super noticeable, and I think I'm gonna be able to get plenty more miles out of the shoe before this is a real issue, but I'm starting to notice it. And the only reason I bring that up is because I've spoken to other coaches who have worn these shoes for also running and daily wear and coaching, and they're starting to have a similar issue with their lip on their toe box. So definitely something to keep in mind there. Try not to drag your toes too if you're running on concrete, because that can probably exacerbate and accelerate that. The second con that I could see folks having with this shoe is the midsole. It's not gonna be your most responsive midsole. This midsole does not feel super lively when you're doing sprints or any form of like plyo. So if you're doing pogos and stuff for the track and whatnot, this is not the most bouncy shoe on the market. It's much more of your middle of the road midsole. It kind of reminds me of the midsole that you get in the Reebok Float Right Energy Foam, where it's comfortable, it does a good job for generalist running, but it's not necessarily a model that I would put into any specific running category where you need a very niche feel. If you want a ton of plushness, for example, for super long distance runs, this model will likely fall a little bit short. And if you want that uber responsive, very dense and very like rebounding type midsole, that's where this model will also start to fall short. So keep that in mind before you invest in this shoe. It's going to be much more general with its feel and performance and how lively it is on your feet when running. To discuss the RAD R1 runner's performance, I'll discuss how this shoe does for running, walking, and daily wear. So in the context of running, the shoe has been really good for more short to mid-range runs. And now when I say short runs, I mean anywhere from like 400 to 1 mile length distances. And then for mid-range, for me, it's like 3 to 5 miles. I typically run multiple 5Ks in a week, and I'll have one slower 5-mile run throughout as well. This shoe has done exceptionally well in all of those verticals. Now, what I would say is that this shoe is gonna be best for anybody who's a little bit more, I would say, slow to moderate with their pace. This is not what I would call a speed shoe, and it's also not a model that I would necessarily is gonna be your best for marathons. I think most marathon runners will be a little bit more specific with their asks, and this is a much more neutral or generalist shoe, in my opinion, regarding its running performance. The swell foam N2 is comfortable and form-fitting, I think, for a variety of running mechanics. So for example, when I'm running a little bit faster, I'm more of a forefoot, midfoot striker, and then on my slower, like 5-mile runs, I'm a bit more of a heel striker. In all those contexts, the shoe does feel pretty good. I never feel overly beat up after taking the shoe off when running in them, so that's also why I like this shoe as more of a generalist shoe. If you're not really sure which type of running shoe you should go with and you really are big on the appearance of your running shoes, that's where I think this shoe is going to fit really well. Again, this would not be my favorite shoe for sprints just because I would prefer a more responsive and even a lower stack height to give me more ground feel when I am sprinting. And then for longer distance runs, generally speaking, if I'm doing a half marathon or anything around that mileage, I will generally reach for models that are a little bit more plush than what the shoe offers. But overall, the shoe has done a really good job for my running needs. It really reminds me of the midsole that you get in like the Reebok Float Ride Energy foam shoes and the Nike Pegasus, where it's kind of like this middle of the road foam midsole that can work for a wide range of runners. In the context of walking and daily wear, I have really enjoyed this shoe. I like how comfortable it is. It feels very natural to wear for longer periods of time, and the upper is really breathable. So we have this mesh and textile upper throughout the midfoot and forefoot, breathes pretty well, even if you're wearing thicker socks, and the boot here is pretty comfortable as well. When I'm not running, I'll actually rock my model a little bit looser, and I'll just slip my foot in and wear them out and about, and that's why I really like them, because they do have a more casual vibe, and I don't have to undo and tighten laces every single time I wear them. So I do like this shoe for daily wear, and I like the appearance as well. I went with the all white colorway because it's very clean, it goes with a lot of different outfits, and they have a lot of awesome colorways that can match different contexts as well. My only gripe with this shoe for daily wear is that we do have exposed foam here on the midfoot. Anytime we have that, we have to be a lot more conscious of our use with the shoes when it's running and whatnot. It can break them down a little bit quicker, but I will say I did rock this shoe a lot when I was in Europe, and it was very damp and rainy then, and it's held up pretty well. This is just something that I would say be conscious of, because again, I am starting to have that outsole lip up here, and I'm curious if that water is actually exacerbating this a little bit. So I'm keeping that in mind moving forward with this shoe. Overall though, for running, I would give this shoe a strong like 7.5 or 8 out of 10. And then for daily wear and walking, I would put the shoe at a strong 8 out of 10 because of its overall appearance. When it comes to the price of the RAD R-1 runner, you can expect to pay around $140. I think that price point is honestly pretty fair for the shoe. If you want a shoe for more generalist running and daily wear, and you like the appearance of this model, it's a really good kind of like middle of the road running shoe. And if you like RAD and you really like that brand and vibe with them, then I do think the price point could easily be justified for this model. All right, so now to answer the question, who should buy the RAD R-1 runner? Number one, I think if you're big on your running shoes appearance, this model will work really well for your needs. They have a lot of good colorways that can be dressed up in different settings, and they don't look overly running focused when you're wearing them out and about in a daily wear context. Number two, if you're somebody that doesn't really know which running shoe you should go with and you're just getting into running, or you're more of a recreational runner, this model can also be good. The Swell Foam N2 midsole does a good job for a lot of generalist running needs, and it's pretty dang comfortable and supportive. The third context where I think this shoe makes sense is if you are big on the materials used in your running shoes, this can also be a really good option to look into. This shoe utilizes more environmentally friendly materials than other running shoes on the market. Now, who shouldn't buy this shoe? Number one, I think if you are looking for a running shoe for speed work or for long distance runs, so doing marathon plus running, you might want to find something that's a little bit more specific and dialed for that performance. And then number two, I think if you have an exceptionally wide foot or you have a flat foot and you don't like any form of arch support in your running shoes, that would also be a reason to pass on this model. And then number three, for my friends out there that like a more minimalist feel, you're obviously not going to probably enjoy the 24mm and 32mm stack height in the forefoot and heel. This model does have a pretty high platform, and I think you will notice that. So when it comes to the sizing and fit of the RAD R-1 runner, I think most folks should be safe going true to size in this model. I have a regular arch and an E to double E width foot, and the shoe fits me pretty dang well. Now I will say the end of the toe box can feel a little bit snug at times. However, what I've done to mitigate that is I wear thinner socks, and that's generally a non-issue. Now, if you have like a 3 or 4 E width foot, you might want to consider that with this shoe. I'm not necessarily certain that you'll have enough toe box room for your needs. And then also, if you don't like any form of arch in your running shoe, that would also be something to consider, because you can feel a tiny bit of arch in the shoe. It's not going to probably be the best for flat foot folks who don't want any arch whatsoever. But all that said, most athletes and lifters should be safe going true to size in the RAD R-1 runner. All right, so now let's break down the weight, heel toe drop, and insole in the RAD R-1 runner. For my size 10 model here, we have a weight of 10.45 ounces. This model's heel to toe drop is 8mm. The heel sits at 32mm, and the forefoot sits at 24mm regarding its stack height. And then this model also does have a thin foam removable insole. All right, so now let's go to the construction of the RAD R-1 runner. Up here on the toe box, you have an extended outsole layer that lips up. I wish they made this just a smidge wider. I think you'd get more durability out of it. Once again, like mine is starting to lip a tiny bit, and I'm keeping an eye on that as time goes and to see what kind of exacerbates this from lipping faster. You also have a synthetic overlay here, giving you additional toe support. Looking at the upper of the shoe, you have a breathable mesh and textile upper that extends from the forefoot into the midfoot. The breathability of this shoe is pretty good overall. Back here in the boot, you do have a structured boot cup with a padded heel. This heel is pretty dang comfortable for walking and running. And then you also have a padded mesh tongue. This tongue does have a gusset, so it stays in place pretty well. And then you also have 5 core eyelets that go up with a 6 back here for lace lock. And then looking at the midsole of this shoe, you have that swell foam into midsole. So this midsole is a little bit more bouncy and softer than the swell foam used in the RAD 1 training shoe, as it probably should be because obviously this is a running shoe. The stack height of this model is 24 millimeters up here in the forefoot and then 32 millimeters back here in the heel. And then when it comes to branding, you have some RAD branding here on the lateral side of the shoe and then over here on the tongue and at the bottom of the midfoot. And then looking at the outsole in this shoe, you have rubber that covers the heel and the forefoot. You have some exposed foam here in the forefoot and then at the midfoot and then back here in the heel. But overall, that pretty much wraps up the gist of this shoe's construction. If you have additional questions, drop a comment down below. All right, guys, that wraps up my review of the RAD R-1 Runner. Now, would I get this shoe again? Honestly, probably yes, depending on the colorway. I like the shoe a lot for its appearance. Now, would I preferably wait for the next iteration to where the midsole hopefully gets a little bit more of an improvement, it's a little bit more poppy? Yes, but I am a sucker for the shoe's appearance and sweet colorways. But all that said, if you have additional questions on the R1 Runner, drop a comment down below or reach out to me on Instagram, whichever you prefer. And as always, y'all, drop a like on the video, subscribe to the channel. I'll see you guys in the next one.